Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Opinions. Your idea is terrible, but mine is very good. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Proto-Cop. Part robot, part man, all cop. In theaters now. Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We do a lot of things behind in front of the camera, and we use all of that as a basis of analyzing films, seeing what makes them tick, things that maybe you didn't notice or didn't think too deeply about, themes and cinematography tricks and how it plays into the story you're trying to tell, and a number of other things, music. We try to use all of that as a basis for, one, getting better at, telling stories ourselves, but also it's just fun to talk about movies in an intellectual way, intellectualize art. I appreciate that. I feel like most good art has some kind of intellectual undertone that you can engage with if you wish. And some of the best art allows you to not have to in order to appreciate a film, right? You can, go watch a movie and just say, oh man, that was fun, and then go have dinner. Or, the best stuff is like you go have dinner and then talk about it for another hour and a half. And like, whoa, what about this character decision? What is it really trying to say about whatever, the nature of war? Those are really fun things that I think we try to tease out anytime we're covering a film, because it's more fun to engage intellectually. And I think most of the movies, I was thinking about this recently, like we've only done like maybe 3 comedies, I want to say, because comedies usually just don't have that much to say about the world, on average. And so the stuff that we tend to cover, science fiction especially, right, has something else that's going on underneath the surface. And so we really appreciate films that are layered with a lot of, thought and philosophical ideas to engage with beyond whatever's happening within the story itself. What say you?
Totally agree. And I feel like this film that we're going to do today has a lot of that stuff. There's just a lot of stuff around the plot that thicken the plot, which is already super thick. I mean, as thick as it gets, if you want to be honest, and especially in a world today of stakes get higher and higher and higher, and the world is in danger all the time. How do you heighten the feeling of that? Well, instead, if the world is always at stake, right, then it's got to be the relationship or lack thereof or development of the characters and how they interact with each other. And I feel like this film does a very good job of that.
Nice. And what film is that, man?
So if you haven't seen it, today we're covering Crimson Tide. So please pause this episode and go watch it from the, 1994, 1995?
95.
95. Pause the episode, go watch it, because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
So many things. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to look at cinematography, the use of Dutch angles for dramatic effect, and also for the setting. We'll look at some of the story and writing, the betrayals, the conversations about everything, horses, command, duty, and doing what's right. We'll look at some of the performances, music by Hans Zimmer. We'll touch on some random Crimson Tide facts and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. On a U.S. nuclear sub... let me start that over. Quick synopsis of the film. On a U.S. nuclear missile sub, a young first officer stages a mutiny to prevent his trigger-happy captain from launching nuclear missiles before confirming his orders to do so. It's directed by Tony Scott. Screenplay by Michael Schiffer. Cinematography by Dariusz Wolski, featuring Denzel Washington as XO Hunter, Gene Hackman as Captain Ramsey, Viggo Mortensen as Weps, George Dzundza, as Cobb, James Gandolfini as Lieutenant Dougherty.
I don't mean to suggest that you're indecisive, Mr. Hunter. Not at all. Just, complicated. Of course, that's the way the Navy wants you. Me, they want it simple. Well,
You certainly fooled them, sir.
Be careful there, Mr. Hunter. It's all I got to rely on, being a simple-minded son of a bitch. Rickover gave me my command, a checklist, a target, and a button to push. All I had to know is how to push it. They'd tell me when. They seem to want you to know why.
I would hope they'd want us all to know why, sir.
At the Naval War College, it was metallurgy and nuclear reactors, not 19th century philosophy. War is a continuation of politics by other means. Von Clausewitz.
I think, sir, that what he was actually trying to say was a little more
Complicated?
Yes, the purpose of war is to serve a political end, but the true nature of war is to serve itself.
I'm very impressed. In other words, the sailor most likely to win the war is the one most willing to part company with the politicians and ignore everything except the destruction of the enemy. You'd agree with that?
I'd agree that that's what Clausewitz was trying to say.
But you wouldn't agree with it?
No, sir, I do not. No, I just think that in the nuclear world, a true enemy can't be destroyed.
Attention on deck. Von Clausewitz will now tell us exactly who the real enemy is. Von?
In my humble opinion, in the nuclear world, the true enemy is war itself.
Can you just let it roll?
We'll just watch it.
Just watch the entire movie.
Oh, bro. I mean, where do you even begin? This is close to 30 years old. I mean, it's 28, this year. Wow. What do you think, man? Crimson Tide.
I mean, the one statement that I've been waiting to make since we said we were going to do this movie was, before I even watched it, was they don't make movies like this anymore. And I texted it to you yesterday, I guess it was, right? Because I couldn't wait any longer because we had to miss last week because of craziness. This film just does it all, man. It is, to me, one of the most perfect films. It is just so fantastic. And as I'm watching it, and I don't know how I would make it any better. I mean, I love that one of your notes is Dutch angles for a setting, right? I mean, how else? What better way to make a space feel cramped than to angle the camera so that it feels like that's the only way you could get that shot, right? Like it just feels like you're backed up against a wall all the time in this, metal tube under the water, right? Except when there's the relaxed moments, like when he's walking the dog and the dog is peeing on, we have like normal shot. It's a 2-shot even, in this, and even they're on a railing. So the walls are out to the side farther. Right. So it feels like the most open space it could possibly be. Right. So you feel relaxed, but, and then the captain comes back and he's like, no, I'm forcing this down their throat. Like they gotta be strong when it's hard to be strong, all this stuff. So it kind of like sucks the walls in that moment. It's a masterclass in every sense of the word in filmmaking to me. I mean, and I've seen other submarine movies that are fantastic, just as good, but something about this movie, and maybe it's Gene Hackman and Denzel going at each other. I mean, it's probably Gene Hackman and Denzel going at each other, honestly. Like there's just something about it that is so beautiful and turns it into art. Seeing those two people on screen turns it into art for me. And what I was talking about earlier with, and you got to think about other movies that have come out around this time. You've got Hunt for Red October. You've got Top Gun, like the original, like all these where like the world is at stake, right? And it's just like, so how do you make something more important? Well, you do a couple of things in this film. They take away the knowledge of whether or not an order is correct, right? And they take away that knowledge from not only the people, like the characters, but also from you, the audience. You don't know if it's correct or not. You could be the only sub out there that could launch, the nukes, but you have to do it by this certain time, or else the world is at stake. You're going to lose the country. The country will, cease to exist.
Right, because the perspective is trapping us with them. We don't get any outside knowledge. That's a good point. Yeah.
They don't have the knowledge, and we don't have the knowledge. We have as much as they do, but they are the professionals, quote unquote. So what do you do when you are alone? You have no way to contact the outside world because your beacon has, been destroyed. You can't come up to the surface, like all of this stuff. It's putting them in a position in a very smart way that has taken away that piece of knowledge from all of us. That's so awesome. It's so wonderful. Then you feel like you're trapped in a sub and the world has disappeared, right? It is just you with these guys in this sub. And then, you can, and Denzel's performance is so masterful. I mean, he's just one of my favorite actors of all freaking time because he can do it all in an instant. And that clip that you showed is so perfect of, he can laugh and be light, but that there's something beneath the surface that he wants to say, but he has to be very careful about how he says it. And he is walking on thin ice, but at the same time, he respects the captain and everybody at the table. And he's new on the ship too, so he doesn't want to overstep his bounds, and he plays that all perfectly. But then at the very end, that last line, I mean, there's like, you can see a shift in his body instantly when he his smiles and then he says the line, but he's straight. And it's just so perfect.
I completely agree. Like, for the performances, I love the body language throughout the entire movie because there's a pecking order, and therefore all the words you have to say have to be right. It's a yes, sir. It's a no, sir. It's thank you, sir. May I have another, sir, right? But your body language is where you start to betray how you actually feel, because you can't do it in your tone. You can't do it in your word choice. And so it's going to creep out. Lies creep out. The truth gets out of there. And so even when they're doing like the weapons readiness test, this is a beautiful little moment between Hackman and Denzel where they're using body language. And even Denzel starts to strangle his voice a little bit, confirming the orders. He's saying the right things, but he's having a hard time getting his body to cooperate, right? And so his voice kind of chokes the dialogue a little bit. And it's all subtextual, right? It's all non-verbalized stuff. It's communicated with looks, the physical tension, the way he's carrying himself suddenly. Gene Hackman's giving him second glances, third glances, shaking his head. It's everything they're not saying. And to your point about that scene, like Denzel, the way he uses a pause is just perfect. Like, it's so good. And he's carefully responding. He's choosing his words, and it's all those things are just implied by the way he takes a moment before saying his line. Right. And even that pause, that laughter from the table creeps in, and he joins in like, yeah, okay, this is funny. Cause at first he's really trying to think and choose his words. And then everyone's kind of cracking up like, okay, yeah, okay, I'm with y'all. Like, and it's all influencing his delivery, right? He's reacting. He's not crafting a delivery. He's reacting to the moment, and creating these pauses is allowing all that stuff to happen, right? Same thing a few minutes later, right? Well, you seem to have the pulse of the men. And he pauses. He really waits because before he finally says, thank you, sir. Because he's not sure if that's a compliment or sarcasm. Right. But he has to say something. The performances, man, God, I think to your point, Hackman and Denzel just, teeing off on each other like that is certainly a big reason why this movie just resonates. I've watched it 2.5 times now, and each time I'm like, I just can't blink. It's just, I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to do anything else.
Can I also say that however they used to capture audio is lost now. The sound on this film, if you watch this film, especially in headphones, is just so like it just sucks you in. If you just listened to the clip that Wes just played in headphones, right? It's so unbelievable. There's silence, right? There's silence, and all you hear is the hum of the engine, and that's all you need. Maybe a couple of clinks from some glasses, but you're waiting on pins and needles to hear what Gene Hackman's character is saying, what the captain is going to say, and he speaks. And then anytime that you hear Denzel speak in any movie, he has this way of saying I don't know if it's because he used to do like stage performance or what, but his enunciation is just like no other actor I've ever heard. It's just really specific.
Yeah, even Gene Hackman, like he knows how to hit his T's and all that, but like the way Denzel speaks with such clarity and with that bass, like I think that's the hard thing to do. I think it's easier to be that particular when your pitch is higher, but to kind of carry that weight of his bass and then kind of hit every word, it feels like you're being punched in the face every time he talks.
It really does, but in such a ASMR kind of way.
Yeah.
That clip is so great. And kudos, like Tony Scott is a master in this film. Like I don't know how much of this was in the screenplay itself, but like just the way that each of the scenes are crafted, the thoughtfulness in the audio and how it's captured when music swells in, it's there to support. It doesn't always have to be there. That scene is a perfect scene that you played of no, we're going to put them in this room. And I want to remind you that in this room, we are in a submarine under the water. So I want you to hear the hum of the engine, maybe some crackles of the hull or whatever. But I want you to feel like you're in a room in a submarine, not, at dinner with some guys. Like, no, you might be at dinner, but you're in a submarine. And you absolutely feel that. And I feel that throughout the entire film. The audio is just so fan-freaking-tastic. It makes me want to go watch the movie again just to listen to it. It's so beautiful.
I was blown away. I had no idea before hitting play. Even the first time I didn't realize it. The second time through, I saw in the opening credits music by Hans Zimmer.
I know.
That floored me. I was like, oh my God, that probably explains a lot.
Yeah.
Because he won a Grammy for this, for the main theme here.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Killed it. And God, I mean, he's so good. He does a great job. Like early on, music ties these really fast sequences together. There's that where they're above deck, or they're launching from the harbor, and then suddenly they're on deck having a conversation. That probably takes a good 10 seconds to make that switch. And the music is what carries us through. And it's amazing, to have such a fluid transition thanks to the score, because it's big and then suddenly it's personal enough to have a conversation. And so you get the majestic feeling of going out to sea in this big, powerful machine. And then suddenly, that goes away and is, swiftly replaced with this more subtle, personal, score to allow us to enter into a moment with Hunter and Ramsey, because they're about to have that conversation on the deck before submerging. And the music does that. And then later in the film, I don't know why I even heard it. It's one of those things where, it just popped out all of a sudden. The use of the highs and lows in the film, the score is flawless. Like at one point, he kills the bass in order to make space for like torpedoes launching. And there's that whoosh that comes right when when Hunter fires, those snapshots. And you need to hear that whoosh, and that's happening, in the lower end. And so moments before that, we're like, bass and everything's feeling like your blood is pulsing in your ears, and then suddenly gone, but it doesn't feel like it's gone because of the way the sound editing is working in hand with the score to feel the whoosh, so you can feel like the power of what's happening, within the submarine itself is flawless. That's like at the 52-minute mark. And then similarly, moments later, when they're sealing off the hatch, same thing to your point about great sound design, the way they're capturing things and layering it. When they're sealing off the hatch, they let the sound design, the context, and the performances really carry most of that drama with just light musical emphasis. It's just almost in the background. But everything that's happening is already so tense. You don't need to do much else. And he didn't. He's like, I know my part here and I'm going to play my part so that whenever I do come back, you'll feel it. So sometimes you go away so that you can come back. Right. And to that end, like the choirs, because not long after that sequence with the sealing the hatch, great, incredible use of choirs, because instead of big dramatic music, we're going to make it solemn. This is when they're sinking to crush depth. And I feel like a lot of other composers, right, would really build up the drama, like, don't, right? And you just kind of go big to make it feel like this is the moment where everyone dies. And instead, it feels like a prayer. It feels like this regretful tone of we're going to lose everything. All is lost. And it's just beautiful because it feels almost like inevitable at that point with the music, the way the music is playing. You feel the silence and the weight of the sea. God, I don't know.
It feels like you're going so deep that the music can't reach you.
Ooh.
That you're losing the world. The world is going away from you, right?
Yes.
And so the less there is, the more intense it feels. You're totally right. And then the engines cut off and they're just sinking. And the way they shoot that, I don't know how they do that. Is it model? Is it a model? Like, how do you?
Yeah, I think that's a miniature. There's a lot of ways you can shoot underwater. I saw a really cool Reddit post a few weeks ago where a guy used someone's model, and instead of using water, which I think they used water in this movie, but instead of using water, what he actually did was fill a room with haze, like packed it to the gills. Like you can't see 3 feet in front of you. And so whenever you shoot, and then lit it. And so it's got, this, and then you're moving the camera through that. And because it's perfectly still, it's perfectly stacked and pressurized in a sense. Whenever you move the camera by the huge miniature submarine, it just feels like especially motorized, right? You motorize it and it's perfectly fluid. It just feels like the sub is moving by you with some sound effects, right? Suddenly it just works. Huge wide angle lens to make it feel massive on, that's one way. I think they just had massive tanks. And yeah, huge, probably like a 20-foot, sub miniature or something like that. That would be my guess. But all the underwater shit, man, the explosions, those live rent free in my head for the last 28 years, man.
yeah, man. Absolutely. So good. I mean, I could keep going, but I want to hit some of your points.
I'm curious. What else? Did anything else, once you knew it was Hans Zimmer, did anything pop out to you about that? Or were you just kind of like, holy crap, Hans was doing it in the 90s?
No, I've known he's been doing since like, I don't know, earlier than that, maybe even the 70s or at least 80s, right?
The 80s, he had his band, right? But was he scoring back then?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, for sure. Smaller stuff, obviously, not like big giant stuff, but yes. I don't remember what his first film was, but I don't remember. But anyway, no, one of the beautiful things about early Hans is that it's really easy. Like, I don't think he wrote a whole lot of stuff that was kind of John Williams level, like unforgettable motifs until, the 2000s, really. Maybe Gladiator would be the first one that I like remember the theme, where you think Gladiator, you're like, okay, I remember that theme. But, I don't remember the theme to this, if you ask me hum the theme to Crimson Tide, I wouldn't be able to do it. But so it kind of just was there to support, for the and honestly, it's really hard to overshadow the people on the screen. and the scenarios they're going through. And then the way that Tony played with the music and included it when it was necessary and not when it wasn't. And he did things like what you just said, which is like cut out the bass when we want to feel the torpedoes being shot. It was almost like it was, 100% there to support and direct you on, you should feel tense now. You should feel relaxed now. You should feel like something's about to happen. It was very supportive for me as a viewer rather than, oh, remember this moment, which is like if you watch like Interstellar or something.
Right.
I mean, and if you're on social media, you know what we're talking about, then you might feel those things also, but they're so iconic. Those themes are so iconic that anyway, he was just a very different writer back then, which is totally fine, but it just supported for me. It wasn't something that I just latched onto.
Nice.
To be honest. But it was beautiful. It's beautiful.
Nice. Yeah, man. I love this movie so much. I think the wrestling match with the philosophy is definitely what pulls me in, because you have two incredible titans, acting in scenes together a lot. There's other films where you might have two big actors that maybe they don't actually have that many scenes together. I'm talking about something like Heat, right? Pacino and De Niro barely talk to each other in that movie. And so that happens, but seeing this where they're not just in scenes together, but they're in conflict constantly. And there's this chess match going on between them about authority. Like all of that pulled me in. There's a lot that I didn't understand as a kid watching this. The most basic fundamental thing I didn't understand was Crimson Tide itself. And why the movie was called Crimson. I never understood. I just thought like, oh, it's like a bloody tide. And it's a cool name. Alabama Crimson Tide is obviously like the football team. And so it's a play on the USS Alabama, and then using some of the imagery of a Crimson Tide, of course. It all kind of plays lightly in harmony, but thematically doesn't mean much, because they could have easily just like Hunt for Red October makes sense. That's literally what we're doing here. Crimson Tide could just as easily be called To Launch or Not to Launch, but it doesn't sound very cool. The other thing as a kid, ever since this movie, I use the word concur like all the time. And every single time I say concur, I'm thinking about this movie. If you ever hear me use the word concur, you caught me in a moment thinking about Crimson Tide. And so it's probably every day. Like last week, I was on set with, Sergio and Rocky and those guys. And I said concur at least 50 times. And I don't bring it up because no one's going to know, why would you link concur with this random movie? And of course the whole movie is about whether or not these two guys are in agreement. But yeah, for me, it introduced that into my vocabulary and I've never looked back.
Yes.
But I mean, other than that, like, it's beautiful. Tony Scott, him and Ridley Scott both can shoot the hell out of anything. They can make a bad story just look beautiful and you want to watch it. Like, I still watch Prometheus, despite it being Prometheus, because it's just gorgeous. And Crimson Tide, to your point, like, it is claustrophobic. He's shooting on these longer lenses, not just because it looks good, but because if you shoot on wider lenses inside a submarine, it's going to feel like a much bigger space than it should. Like, break out the longer lenses, compress the image, and make it feel like you're trapped, like you were saying perfectly. Like, yeah, let's shoot longer. And so we're going to cramp everything. And sooner or later, temperatures boil. And now it's like we're locked in the frame, just in the same way that they're locked in the ship. It all is just syncing together. It's just, God, Tony Scott, man. Definitely miss looking forward to his movies. And cinematography wise, the other stuff, there's so much that's dramatic throughout the film. And the briefing room at the beginning, it's raining outside and you can see all those water cascades on the windows all over everyone in the room. Like, they're just shooting all of that into the room. And it feels like before we even set out to sea, it feels like we're already underwater.
Yeah.
We're already there, and it's just so dramatic. That it's dark in there. Everyone has raccoon eyes, right? If you're shooting top light, normally you might want to bounce some of that light back into someone's face so that you can see their eyes. And if you don't do that, right, our eyes are recessed, right? We had the concave orbital sockets. And so you need that, or else you get raccoon eyes, right? Those rings around her eye, under her eyes. And he just let it live. He's like, nope, we'll get plenty of eye light later in the film when we're on the sub. But right now, we don't know who's who. And I feel like that's kind of a reflection of Hunter. You know, he doesn't really know who's who. You can't really look anyone in the eye or get a read on them just yet because they're military men and they're got their walls up and they're here to do a job. And I feel like that's all reflected in the lighting decisions right from the beginning. It's just beautiful and beautifully thought. And I love, it's so rare to see filmmakers now be comfortable with like the raccoon eyes because people want everything to look pretty, look beautiful. Like, no, sometimes we really need to not be able to see what someone's thinking. And you see what people are thinking through their eyes, window to the soul, that whole thing. And so I would just love to see those decisions made specifically, you know, more often than they really are. Now, I'm sure there's the heavyweights, Spielberg and whoever else, that are comfortable with it. But a lot of upcoming newer filmmakers, I don't think they're comfortable with that. They just want pretty images. And I feel like I just really want to lead a rebellion on pretty images. That's my Don Quixote tilting at windmills kind of thing. I'm uncivilizing the world. But cinematography wise, also so many Dutch angles. Some are for just drama, right? And then some are for the setting. Some are for both, right? So the fire in the galley towards the beginning, our ship is level. We don't need to be tilted. And that's what a Dutch angle is. I think Todd defined it earlier. But in case you missed it, like a Dutch angle is where you're not level, right? You don't have zero bubble. Like you're tilted on your axis a little bit, left or right. So like if you tilt your head to the left and the room kind of takes a tilt. Of course, we have really good correction in our heads for that, called the brain, I guess. But otherwise, you know, when you do it with the camera, everything feels tilted and on its side and weird. And so you can do that to create a sense of drama. And in the fire galley, whenever the fire breaks out in the galley and Hunter rushes in, right, we look at him and then cut to the fire, and it's on this heavy Dutch angle. We're like tilted 45 degrees to the left. And it just feels crazy. It feels big. It feels dramatic. And then, but later it's for story reasons. You're on a ship. Sometimes it's got to go up and down. And to do that, it has to tilt. And so whenever the ship dives, we do tilt with it. And we use a Dutch angle that's now motivated by the story. Same thing later in the film when we're authenticating the EAM to launch missiles. They use a Dutch that's both motivated and dramatic. So now it's both. It's like we're diving, but it's also like everything feels off kilter because the story is also off kilter. And then, of course, right when the big drama is starting to unfold, Captain Ramsey calls for a zero bubble, right? He's asking to level off the ship, and they start to level off, and it's beautiful because they do that. That's directing, man. He has to know exactly what I need, when I need it. And they call for the zero bubble in a close up, and we cut around. And then when we come back, we're in this wide shot of the con, and the ship starts to level off as Hunter is making his way up the aisle to the captain. And so the ship visually levels off within the shot as he's walking up. And it's physical. Like you can see they're clearly on some kind of hydraulic because Denzel himself, you can see the weight shift as it levels off. It's freaking gorgeous. That's a lot of work because if the ship is on hydraulics, that means the camera needs to compensate. So either you're removing a wall so that you can shoot, uninfluenced by the hydraulics, or if it's all, stacked in, which I imagine you're flying off walls, that's probably a really expensive set. And that case, like if you're locked in, let's say they actually decided to moronically shoot this in a submarine, then you would need a way to compensate, whether that's the cam op, or probably some other motorized control, with the gimbal. But yeah, whatever, like Dutch angles were used superbly in this for so many reasons.
And keeping in mind, this is in 1995.
Yeah.
So we
fewer
have a lot
motorized
more advancements when it comes to like motorized things.
Yeah, I don't know how many techno cranes you were playing with back then, but
exactly,
probably harder to come by, very expensive. Same thing, cinematography, a lot of EAM close-ups, the emergency action message, right? They have that box that lets you know when there's a message coming in. You've got mail. And so that they use it so many times throughout the movie, especially the early on. You need to do that because we need to understand when we are waiting for it to blink at the end, we can now recognize it and understand what's missing, because we cut to those shots at the end when we're waiting for, comms to come back on, and we're just looking basically at an empty frame. It's just a box with nothing on it. And if you don't set that up beforehand, we don't really understand why we're looking at this box. What does it matter? But if you set it up properly, of course, suddenly it carries emotional meaning. That blankness is like devastating. You're waiting, like we need that thing to turn on. And so you just need to set that up with a lot of EAM close-ups. The first one is the test, right? The weapons test, and then the first emergency launch message, and then the second one. And so use it a ton. But then at the end, I love when they're finally authenticating that final EAM. We're listening to everyone authenticate, right? Rattle off, the codes, and we're just cutting around to reaction shots of everyone waiting. And it's a great use of our time because we already know what they do, how they do it. We've seen it a few times now. Now it doesn't matter. We don't need to really sit and watch that happen. It's a much better use of our time if we cut to everyone and their anticipation, build up some emotional stakes, because that's the payoff moment. The answer to who is right, if we are in fact in a nuclear war, is happening right there. Just smart, like good directing decisions, good editing decisions, A++ all around. Now for the big money, story and writing wise, which is what really pulls you in. You give these guys, Denzel and Hackman, a reason to be in this movie, and it's through the writing. They spend a lot of time early in the film building relationships and perspectives, which build the stakes, right? And it starts with, the birthday party. It establishes Hunter as a good dad, a good husband, right? He has something to fight for, all that stuff. And there's no need to belabor it, right? We have a birthday party, then we have the tough goodbye at the dock, and we get it, and we feel it. This is a guy we trust and a guy we like. He's earned all of that in just 2 really brief sequences. But it also builds a relationship with Weps, between Hunter and Weps, which is crucial for the betrayal later on. And we have 2 of those betrayals. The other one is established early on with that same dock sequence. Captain Ramsey is given that speech before putting out to sea, right? And who do we have? We have Mr. Cobb repeating every single thing Captain Ramsey says. Very inspiring, sir, or whatever he says. The finest, sir. Just echoing loudly every single phrase he says. Therefore, when Captain Ramsey retakes the ship near the end of the film, Cobb siding with Hunter instead of Ramsey, and as well as Weps siding with Ramsey instead of Hunter. So much betrayal on both sides, because now you have Cobb, who was just word for word right behind, lockstep with the captain, no longer saying what he says, right? He's taking a stand. And then you have Weps, who's buddies. He goes to his kid's birthday party. Like that's bros, right? And now he's making a stance as well. That's betraying that relationship with Hunter. And it's so good, because betrayals on both sides is really important in order to establish that this is not about loyalty to the man. It's about loyalty to what you think is proper. And this furthers the conversation about the conflict at the heart of the film. Whereas if they had each sided with their own guy, it doesn't reveal anything. It's just about loyalty to your own. Betrayal is great here to help us tell the philosophical stakes. The who, the how, the when. Should a nuclear missile be launched and by whom? Like, that's all lockstep, and betraying, someone here really, really furthers that conversation. And those conversations are happening throughout the entire movie, right? We have conversations about command and responsibility, the nature of war. And I'll just glance at some of these conversations because literally almost every time someone's talking, it's either one of those conversations or it's just establishing the stakes of the war itself, right? Rodchenko. It's one or the other. I don't know if there's any other conversations that really happen that's not about those things versus the other. I think pretty much every single conversation can boil down to one of those two big conversations. And so the officers' dinner that we heard is just a philosophical conversation, right? About the use of atomic weapons, the use of the war, the nature of war, right? Philosophy's fun. That's a fun conversation to have over dinner. Why not? But then you have the conversation post weapons, that weapons test and the fire galley, and the death. And now we're having another conversation. This is about chain of command. And I love this little thing because we're going from philosophical discussions. Yeah, I get it. No, I get it. Now it's like, nah, this isn't about philosophy. This is about doing what you're told. And Ramsey has this comment where he says, look, I'm not looking for a company of kiss asses, but if you have something to say, then say it in private. And if that's not possible, then bite your freaking tongue. And it's like, it's ironic, like laughing out loud here, because we established at the start that Ramsey churns through XOs, right? His excuse when he's onboarding Hunter is, my last guy has appendicitis. He's the best man I ever knew. And then we're walking down the hall and they're making jokes about all the war that Ramsey's seen. They're like, yeah, he fought in Panama, and then he took out 9 XOs last year. Like, and it's like just making a comedy of like, oh, maybe the whole appendicitis thing isn't really what's going on here. Maybe this guy has a problem. He's just paying lip service about his position on kiss asses when actually what he actually wants is just people to agree with him and fall in line. That's all he really cares about. And at the end of that conversation, he says, we're here to preserve democracy, not to practice it, which is probably a tried and true position in the military all around the world, regardless of countries, certainly in the States, I'd imagine.
And then his statement in the clip that you shared of him being very black and white, being not complicated. You show me how to push the button and tell me when. And that's what you get. That's what the military wants from him. And that makes sense. He's like, everybody under me can question all they want. They can think about all they want. They can be as complicated and make it as complicated as they want. But if I am complicated and I'm the one pushing the button, then things delay. And if things delay, then according to him, people die or we lose or whatever, like that was such an amazingly well-written scene that it kind of reminds me of like a really great song, like an old U2 song where they say the same thing that you already know, just in a new way. And all of a sudden you like come to life and you kind of like see it in a different light, or you see it in a different way, or you see it for the first time, And in 1995, I imagine that is a really interesting conversation that probably hasn't been really had, before. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to crystallize all these perspectives and boil them down into very simple motivating factors behind each character, right? To have Ramsey say, I'm simple. I'm trained to do this, everything you just said. Like, that's a really hard thing to figure out and write in such a concise way. Like, figuring out how to say a thing with 1,000 words is pretty easy. I do it every episode. But
good sir.
Learning how to do it in a sentence, man, that takes a lot of skill. And this is just a masterclass on writing, like all phases. Another conversation that they're having that is very much in line with what, you were just saying. It's a conversation about horses, actually. It's not obvious, on its face, but horses are a metaphor for control of the ship, right? It's about riding them. It's about conquering and leading. Only one person is at the reins. And so ultimately there's a horse and a rider. You're one or the other. You're taking commands or giving them. And it's not a coincidence that this conversation is laced throughout the film in small splashes. But it's just another one of those little subtle reinforcing concepts that feels like a conversation about something else. And also a really good use of at the end of the film, post, whatever the meeting was, with the other officers, when Hackman gets to say, "You were right." And we're like, oh, we're going to have that moment. And he's like, about the horses. It's just like a really great way to admit defeat without having to admit defeat. Which he kind of does at the end when he walks off, right? He reads the final message and he retires to his room. I took that as he's giving up control of the ship because, man, did he screw that one up. Another conversation is when they're trying to convince Weps, which, side note, the naming convention in this is so good. You have, it's a total sausage fest. You have so many dudes on screen. You're not going to remember everyone's name. And so you want to simplify some of these things. Weps is his name, but it's also what he's in charge of. He's in charge of weapons. You can take that as a naming convention within this group, or you can take it as that's his name. Either way, it works because now every time you hear Weps, you're thinking weapons and you know what he's in charge of in his role on the ship. Similar with Cobb. He's chief of the boat, right? And so COB, Cobb, you can start to understand his position, his role through his name itself. And so those are really nice, simple reinforcing factors that maybe you'll pick it up, but regardless, they're easy to hear, easy to say, and they reinforce their role on the ship if you care to actually pick up on that. Some people won't. There's a lot of words and jargon flying around. But the conversation with Weps, where they're trying to convince him of retaking the ship to unlock the armory and hand out guns, is another debate about the chain of command, orders, doing the right thing. What is the right thing? He just wants the time to confirm the message. That's the whole point. We don't have time. That's a real issue, right? That they're trying to reconcile, and is ultimately, we'll come back to that. And this, Zimmer is making that comment. This is a mutiny and your captain is asking for your help. I love this for two reasons. One, he's misnaming a proper rule as mutiny, right? If you can now position Hunter as mutineer instead of someone who's following proper protocol, well, now you're in the proper moral authority. It's your duty to retake the ship for the captain, right? We need to put down this mutiny. And now this is where everything gets so beautifully muddy for a story, maybe not on a ship, but you need it. You need to have this wrestling match of who's right and who's wrong. And here, the other thing that he's doing is he's leveraging the captain's position as an authority figure. And I'll try to remember to come back to that. I can't remember if I wrote it in my notes, but that's a really important aspect of this story of abuse of power potentially being a side of this whole story, right? And then another conversation, Hunter and Cobb, when they're in lockup after they've retaken the ship, Ramsey's back in the captain's chair. And now Hunter and Cobb are in lockup and they're once again discussing the stakes. If Russia launches, it's bad. If we launch on wrong orders, it's just as bad. And so I don't know that they say this, but my takeaway is that maybe you have to err on the side of not launching. You can't take that back. And I think that's where Hunter is trying to err on. He's trying to err on the side of not doing irreversible damage. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a bunch of guys who are trained to shoot, especially when ordered to shoot. You're now acting against your instincts. And then, of course, Weps finally at the end takes a moral stand against the captain, right? He's in his chair and he just got the call from Hunter, and Hunter's trying to talk to his friend and talk to what should be his subordinate, you don't have to do this. You can make a choice. You can make a stand. You can do the right thing. Just think for a second. Think this through. Think through the big picture, not the small picture. The small picture says you have to do this thing. The big picture says we have redundancy. There are other people who can do this. And until we clarify our orders, you don't have to do this. And so what is Wep hears the order from Captain Ramsey, and what does he do? It's the greatest shot in the movie. He takes a drag on a cigarette. That's amazing.
So cool.
It's so cool, bro. It's so cool.
Man, smoking is so cool. All the kids should do it.
All the kids should do it. But what I love about it is it's doing subversion in two different ways, right? He's rejecting the order by taking a drag on a cigarette, right? Smoking in a submarine is antithetical to what you're supposed to be doing on a submarine, right? It's antithetical to the opening when they're on the deck smoking cigars. So it's an open act of disobedience. You should never be smoking, I assume. You should not be smoking on a submarine based on, I guess, logic. I'm sure they have filters or whatever, but still probably not a good idea. And so it's just a perfect reflection of what he's actually doing. Now, maybe in reality, he just doesn't follow the order, but adding that extra touch of I'm not just rebelling, I'm going to smoke and reinforce that, just in case you didn't catch it. Cap, like I'm here, I'm taking a 5. Yeah. And then of course, Ramsey puts a gun to his head, counts to 3. If there's a time to change your mind, it's going to be there. And he doesn't, right? He doesn't back down until he threatens to kill someone else. He's like, whoa, hey, dude, don't do that. Fine, I'll open it. Now, ultimately, there is no resolution to this whole issue because perhaps it's a paradox to the military. Can you have absolute power to destroy the world? But without chain of command, the military breaks down. And so this, to me, is the bigger issue. And I think what Hunter is saying in that clip, he's trying to draw a distinction between war that we've known and now in a nuclear world, war is different now. You can't just blindly accept orders. And war will never end if you can't go to war with war was his actual point, right? But the only way to not have war is to literally not engage in warfare. And fine, look, you can launch a missile and kill a bunch of innocent people and apologize later. Like, there is unspeakable tragedy in that. No question. I mean, the last 15 years have proven just how devastating technology, can be now. If you've never read the drone papers, right? Go read that. Go read the synopsis. Obama was killing civilians and relabeling them as enemy combatants. Like, just bonkers. Like, everyone loves Obama, right? Okay, go read that and reassess maybe what you think about his time as president. And Hunter is over here trying to say, like, you can do those things and come back from it. The second we launch a nuclear warhead, no coming back from that. You have to rethink that whole process, all of it. Chain of command maybe can't stand up to the weight of nuclear warfare. And that's a really important conversation and way to rethink chain of command and pushing the button, so to speak. Because the end of the film makes a point to say that now it solely resides with the president. And I'm like, should it? Should it?
Yeah.
Should anyone?
I don't think so.
Yeah, same. Like, I understand tactically why we have to take these stances, right? Of course, because if people don't think you're willing to use their weapon, then they'll use theirs potentially and end you. And so but in my mind, like, if I'm the guy that's being told to push the button, you're going to have to shoot me. Like, I don't care if I can see the missile's coming at us. I'm still not launching it because everyone's going to lose. Fine, they won, but maybe 200 years from now, something else takes place. We can see that I'll die. I'll literally die on the hill. I don't know. There's just no good solution to anyone launching a nuclear weapon. I think you have to live with mutually assured destruction as a concept, not as an actual practice, I guess is my point. But that's why I love this movie, is it's trying to invoke all this conversation and without ever telling you what the actual answer is. We end the movie and they literally say that, right? Their whatever general is like, we're going to be talking about this for years because we don't know. We simply don't know. You're both right and you're both wrong. You disobeyed the chain of command, but it ended up being the right call. And you're retired now. Like, you go away.
You can go walk your dog.
You walk it off, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you want to comment on any of that before I jump into those last couple thoughts.
No, I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, I'm trying my best here.
No, we can talk about it all we want off air.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're just going to leave the military discussion to the military.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping to provoke conversation, not to be like the final moral arbiter of anything here.
Exactly. I mean, if when you go back and watch our episode or listen to our episode of A Few Good Men, there are arguments. There are arguments, and I don't think that what we're saying like negates the necessity for a strong military willing to take action, or anything like that. I just think this film, to your point, does a great job of saying this is different. It's, it went from, guys with sticks to guys on horses to guys with bows and arrows to guys with muskets to guys with machine guns. And now this is a completely different thing than any other, war development throughout history, I feel like. So I am not going to speak to it. I do not.
Yeah, it's crazy that between this and Chernobyl, it wasn't my intention to string together like nuclear discussions so close together.
Right.
But
and Oppenheimer,
right? Like, it's all right there, because nuclear could be salvation. It could be the end of all things, humanity. And we get to decide. It's a good conversation to have, even just amongst friends.
Yes.
Certainly in the political landscape, we need to be having these conversations, and we're really not. We are really not having those discussions where it counts. So yeah, I guess that's the other thing I love about this film, which is the authenticity. Like, I love all the little technical details, the dialogue jargon, right? Proper titles and execution of orders, repeating the command. Like, it eats up a ton of page on the script, but it really pays off in the feeling of authenticity. And it's strangely compelling. Like, I could watch these guys just take orders and do their jobs, and that would have been a good movie. But it's really cool. The other thing that I thought was interesting is the way they named Russia as an enemy. Well, technically, a militant faction throwing a coup in Russia, and ultimately that coup gets put down. But naming big world leaders, we don't really see that as much over the last like 10, 15 years. Like, we've really dialed that back in the media, in movies and stories. And I think for good reason. I think it's the beauty of living in a free market, like having something you want to sell to these people. Like, we want to sell to China, so we're not going to throw China under the bus. And to some degree, it can be unhealthy. I don't deny that. But to another degree, it can be very welcoming, and trying to pull them into the fold, and say there's another way to do life. And the more you can expose, and I think this is the absolute best export that America has, is our entertainment, because our artists speak to the spirit of humanity and speak to the spirit of brothership, and all mankind being unified. That happens in our art the more we let other cultures that don't necessarily share their visions of liberty and freedom, the better. I want Russia and I want China and Cuba and whoever else imbibing these vibes, right? To be thinking about chain of command and doing the right thing. I want them to be thinking about all these things. And whenever you're labeling them as the enemy, you're probably going to be a little deaf. Like, how can we hear that? And so I like the direction that the world is moving in that lane. Though there's other ways that we could, discuss it. But this was in 95, and, in the 80s and 90s during the Cold War, very popular to use Russia as a punching bag. Red Dawn, anybody? Like, go Wolverines. And so, yeah. Lastly, some random facts. This will go really quickly. Unlike the Air Force helping Tony Scott make Top Gun, the Navy didn't like the script and would not help him make Crimson Tide. That meant no access to submarines at military bases, no advisories. And man, do I love Tony Scott for saying, all right, F you, we're going to do it anyway. So many filmmakers wouldn't do that today. They would just take the propaganda. And I'm sorry, that's what it is. Whenever you refuse to tell the story that you're trying to tell because you might offend government officials, and you change the story to fit their narrative, that's you're just propagating whatever it is that they want, and you're just becoming a mouthpiece. And so I love Tony Scott for saying, we're going to make the movie that we think we need to make. And so what they did is instead they used, for one, the French Navy. That's why the CNN reporter is on a French aircraft launcher. And he says it a couple of times. But the other thing that he does, and this is really cool, is production camped out at Pearl Harbor, waiting for a submarine to be put out to sea so that they could get B-roll and footage of the sub. And they looked it up and they're like, yeah, it's legal. We can do this. And so we will. F you. And so they literally just waited around until finally a sub was going out. They jumped in helicopters and on a boat and started rolling and just grabbing the shots, waiting to see until it's
Tony
submerged.
Scott did guerrilla style filming.
Yeah, baby.
Oh my God, I'm in love with this man already.
Right? And coincidentally, it was actually the USS Alabama that just happened to be going out to sea. So just, yeah.
Dude, that is crazy.
That's so cool. Oh, yeah, I love that. The other thing is that this story is based on an actual situation that happened. And so they reference the Cuban Missile Crisis a couple of times. And that's exactly what the story is based on. There was a Soviet submarine, B-59, in October of 1962, like October 21st. And so they're kind of emulating the timeline a little bit. And what happened was a U.S. Navy found this sub submerged near Cuba and started sending depth charges trying to get it to surface. Now, these depth charges we weren't at war, right? And so what's happening is the Navy is sending what's actually training charges effectively, right? They have very little charge. They're not designed to like blow up the sub. But the B-59 doesn't know that. And so on board this submarine, they're debating whether or not to launch. And so they're thinking that war's broken out and the captain wants to now use their nuclear torpedoes on the Navy. And so in order to launch the nuclear torpedo, they needed agreement from 3 officers on board. And 2 of them, the captain and political officer, wanted to launch. But the detachment commander did not. And so there was a whole wrestling match of the detachment commander trying to talk down the captain from doing this. That's about as much as I know of the story. Eventually, he does convince the captain to surface and await orders from Moscow. But yeah, that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's wild. Just.
I mean, you hear about the Cold War, you hear about Cuban Missile Crisis, and you hear about those things like they're in the past, like everything is fine. But there have been a few times I've thought, how close did we actually come?
I will link in the show notes a whole list. Some of them are called into question, so they're not necessarily all perfectly confirmed, but it's a long list of very close calls of just weird things, just bad timing. Like it watching this movie and saying two bad things happened at once. They ran into an enemy sub, or a sub they couldn't identify. They didn't even know if it was an enemy sub. And then the radio buoy getting caught in the winch. Yeah. Those just two bad luck things nearly cost them like a nuclear war. And you might look at that and say, oh, what are the odds? Like, this is lightweight compared to some of the weird, crazy one-off things that happened that could have triggered a cascade of events with nuclear holocaust, results. Like, I had to stop reading about halfway through. I was like, this is like terrifying how close so many times the wrong person making the wrong decision. Like one of them, there's a guy who drives his truck onto a runway in order to stop like jets from taking off. Like he's like, no. Like there's so many of those, and some things where it's like they lost communication with this guy and all the redundancies are like, and it turns out, a ship broke up and had to abandon. And at the same time, a flock of geese took out a satellite, or not a satellite, but took out a radio tower, and just bad luck. And luckily, a couple of people were like, I don't think this klaxon ringing and telling me to launch missiles, I don't think it's right. I just don't think it's right. So we're going to wait. It's crazy. Yeah. But it also goes to a lot of my personal opinions about nuclear weapons. But man, ultimately, it's a beautiful movie. The philosophical stakes are there. I love that it doesn't come to this nice, tidy conclusion. And I think that's another thing you and I really love is not being told what the moral is sometimes when there's obviously no moral here. There's no obvious solution. Because as much as I might like to see the end of all war, there's still a lot of warfare out there. And therefore, to your point, we probably do need a military. We need a strong one who can react. And yeah, anyway, this movie is just masterclass. Everything you said, like it's a masterclass on writing, on performing, on shooting, on directing, on scoring, on sound editing, like in everything. Just the effects.
Can we also address the rewatchability?
God,
I mean, you watched it 2.5 times, right? I mean, I could literally go watch it right now and be thoroughly entertained the entire time. And I want to say, yes, it has to do with the writing and the shooting and all that stuff, but it is probably 70% Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington.
Denzel is my favorite actor in the world, man. I'll watch anything with him in it, man. I went to a movie not too long ago and I was like, I know this isn't going to be great, but you know what? I'm still going to have a really good time because Denzel's
I know which one you're talking about and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going. I really want to go tonight. We'll see.
If you give me Denzel, I'm in. You win. I'm not big on actually watching Shakespeare, but I watched the hell out of Macbeth because Denzel. God, is he good? He's so good, bro.
So good, man. Great film.
And then, we need to do more Gene Hackman movies, though, because he is also gripping. My God.
Yes. I mean, I feel like especially later in his career, like the older he got, the more, I guess, believable and he is like, in this role is perfect. Him playing the captain. You believe him. You believe he's been through war. You believe he's been through a lot of stuff, and he's hardened. He is the way he is because of his experience. If he were, as young as he was when he, played Lex Luthor and Superman, it wouldn't have been the same. He had to be older, and so like the older he got, the the more I liked his performances, the more weight they had to them for me.
Completely agree. As much as I like, what is it, Bat 71? I remember watching that as a kid and loved it. But the conversation, my God, would fit perfectly. It's a shame I'm not recommending that, but yeah, we could do like Unforgiven at some point because
Ooh, my God, yeah. Okay, I lied. He's just good all around.
He's all around, baby. But it was the same era. I mean, it was maybe a couple of years before this.
That's right.
Yeah, same era, like 92. I want to say. Yeah, God, Gene Hackman. So yeah, we should line up a couple more of those at some point. Nice. Final thoughts, man.
It's flawless. It's perfect war film. It's a perfect like heady film. It's just there's nothing. The runtime is perfect. There's no fluff anywhere. Like you said, they get from from the launch of the boat into the boat like really quick. Like it's just so well done in all the ways. I wish they made movies like this. I wish they had no fear and did stuff like wait, go to Pearl Harbor and just wait for a boat to leave. I wish they did stuff like that. But because of probably a lot of reasons, notwithstanding streaming and platforms like that, I just feel like there's less opportunity to do stuff like that. But also trusting directors, or having the directors of the level of Tony Scott to trust is also a hard thing. I think nowadays, there's just things that he did in this movie that, and a lot of movies around this time that have to do with war. I feel like they just nailed something in a way that it's really hard to do now. I think that now, maybe there's more like desire for shock and awe or blood and guts or just, explosions and shit like that, where there's very little of that in this movie. And it's all about the interactions and the relationships and the words and the belief systems of the men on board and how they collide than it is about any of that stuff. And I just miss that. And I want more of that, but you have to do it really well in order for something like this to land. And it just is so good. I wish that we could have more of that. I mean, and hopefully the strike will get, reconciled soon, which it doesn't look like it will, but hopefully it will soon. And, we can give writers what they deserve. I mean, I'm on the writer side. I don't give a shit if you are or not. I don't care. I'm on the writer side. Without good writing, everything else is moot. Nothing else matters. If you have a shitty script, no amount of polish will turn that turd into anything else.
Amen.
But a polished turd. Thank you. Just pay the writers what they are due and then some. Give them all they want. Instead of paying, The Rock $30 million to do a freaking movie, pay somebody new $5 million or $1 million or $2 million and pay the writer much more money than you're paying them now. Like I promise you will get so many great scripts. You will have so much great material to make. And that's the problem, is that I think that I'm going on a soapbox here, but I don't give a shit. I feel like Hollywood is just they're on this path of destruction to just redo things or do things they know will work, as opposed to making something that is good from the start with a great script with people that people don't know. Like, okay, so if you're going to make movies that are going to go to streaming, why not take more chances? Why not take more chances on new actors, on new writers, on new directors? Take the chances. You can pay them a little less money. You don't have to get The Rock, because what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, if it's really good, people will talk about it. And when people talk about it, stuff happens. Like, how do you think what was the series that was huge last year? That, oh gosh, where everybody dies.
Oh, Squid Games.
Squid Games. Squid Games was gigantic. It's not even in English, but because it was so well written and so well done, everybody talked about it and it exploded. And it was something that maybe the idea had been done before, but not in this way. You know, there are so many opportunities out there. Take the chance. Nobody knew any of those actors, like nobody here in the States, at least. Take the chances. That's all I have to say. Nobody makes movies like this anymore, and they should, because it's phenomenal. It's just so good.
I love that, man. Ditto. And this movie gives you everything you want out of a submarine movie, which is tricky to do in like peacetime. But you want to shoot off some torpedoes. You want to blow up stuff. You want to sink to the bottom of the ocean and feel like you're gonna get crushed. You want a captain making hard decisions, which is another thing that he gets challenged on, right? Denzel, as he's taking command, you're not ready to make tough decisions yet, right? He's issued this challenge, and then we have to go and find out, right? So let's see Hunter handle battle and make a tough call, and then take out the enemy sub, but at a cost, right? And they all nearly sink and die. And his heroic moment suddenly creates an opening to doubt Hunter and stage a real mutiny. And it's all those things that you want, these power dynamics of everyone being compressed by space and by the situation. All those things that you want out of a submarine movie, they do it. And they do it to the nines without ever needing to do the big thing that we're all afraid of, right? That's the hard thing, to load the gun of shooting a nuclear missile and figure out a way to make it satisfying that it doesn't get launched. And they do. We're all happy they don't launch it, right? We get to the end of the movie and it's like, okay, that was a really great experience. And I'm glad that the gun didn't go off. Metaphoric gun. The other thing, oh God, I forgot. This is such a simple little nothing. But I love that whenever they when Captain Ramsey does his own little coup, and retakes the ship, Gandolfini's character, Lieutenant Dougherty, is pointing his gun at Hunter's chest, and instead of his head. And I love that. It's an easier target than the head. And I feel like too many movies have people pointing guns at heads instead of like in that close proximity. It's so much easier to miss a headshot. The saying is you charge a gun and run from a knife. And it's for that reason. It's harder to aim in close proximity. And so he's aiming at that's a beautiful, simple little tactical thing that a military guy would understand. Just
I love it.
Authentic, man. Yeah, I love it. Yes. So what are you going to recommend this week?
This week, I'm going to recommend a film that I grew up on and absolutely adore. And I can't believe that we haven't covered it yet. And we totally should. The Fugitive, 1993.
Ooh, Harrison.
Yeah. I loved this movie.
I don't care. That's what he said. That's what he says to Tommy.
I don't care. I don't care. In the hall, in the tunnel, whatever, before he jumps. So good. So many iconic little things that happen. Great acting, great storytelling, great plot twists, and just all around really, really good. Now, I haven't seen it in 25 years.
Same.
So
maybe it doesn't hold up,
but I don't doubt for a second that it would hold up.
Same. I agree.
Feel like that is just another pretty flawless film. So yeah, The Fugitive. Nicely
done. I'm going to go back 20 years as well and recommend U-571. If you want another submarine movie, it's got McConaughey and Harvey Keitel. Do you need more? And so it's them on a submarine and World War II. Don't watch it for factual accuracy. It is wildly inaccurate, but it's a really good time. If you just want to hang out and shoot things or whatever they do, you'll have fun. I highly recommend it. Yeah. And so, stay tuned for next week. I think we're going to have a special guest, Sergio Trejos. Is a sound engineer. He's going to join us for The Revenant. I'm excited about that. That one's a long time coming. yeah, so stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note if you're enjoying the show. And shout out to Uva. He listened to your track last week, man. Said he really liked it. You've picked up a new fan. So hopefully everyone has been digging that. We'll have another track released next week. And if we can get Sergio with us, then it'll be really fun to listen to the track with him. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Stay tuned for all of that. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Crimson Tide.
And our quote of the day is from Karl von Clausewitz. It is even better to act quickly and err than to hesitate until the time of action is past.
Is it?
Yeah, he says that. And it's like, oh. Said it with a period at the end of it.
Yeah. Like, this whole movie, I feel like, is a contradiction of the Clausewitz, way of thinking. Like, if you take that mentality into this film or into this scenario, you just erred on the side of ending humanity. Congratulations, right. You're a moron. And so having that mentality, has paid off in years past, but the nature of the game has changed, as we've both been saying, and as this movie's been saying. Nuclear changes everything, and so we probably need to reconsider a lot of things, especially erring on the side of action. Maybe not necessarily the big payday that it once was.
Yeah, totally agree. Amazing. Well, this is a lot of fun. Gave me a great excuse to rewatch this film.
Yeah,
hopefully you guys enjoyed not only the film, but our coverage of it. Wes, you had some great insight there that blew my mind. And if there's a film that you'd like to hear us kind of pick apart, we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear us do. Maybe we'll cover it. Who knows? And make sure to subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a ton. We really, really, really appreciate that. And until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.